Hello again, it's Robin Johnston from Bloom Intelligence, and I welcome you to our webinar today, Identifying and Rescuing At-Risk Restaurant Customers. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Bloom Intelligence, and as such, it's my privilege to lead our field installation and service teams, our internal customer success team, and oversee our marketing and channel partner relationships. I am looking forward to talking with you this afternoon about at-risk restaurant customers and some of the strategies that you can put in place to identify and prevent them from defecting or churning from your organization. First of all, let's take a look at why you should care about at-risk customers. We know there's been a change over the last few years in a lot of aspects of restaurant management. One to our benefit is that customers are spending more of their income, in fact 44 cents per dollar on per food dollar on restaurant purchases now. So customer interest in dining out is at an all-time high. At the same time, you may not be surprised if you're working in the restaurant industry to know that the number of restaurants is growing at literally twice the rate of the population. I don't need to tell you what that does for competition and how that affects our bottom line as restaurateurs. As a result, same-store traffic has declined significantly over the last period of time. In June 2019 alone, same-store traffic declined 3.1% year over year. Repeat customers represent a substantial part of our businesses. An estimate from Tara Johnson, who researched this recently, determined that 1/3 of our revenues is comprised by repeat customers, which, as she pointed out, is astounding considering they only account for 15% of our customer base in some instances, and we'll dive more into that in a couple of minutes. Finally, 70% of previously loyal customers are at risk and unlikely to return. This compares to 3 to 4% of the super loyal who return monthly at a minimum. Now, of course, like any statistic, those statistics will skew depending on the type of restaurant that you have, whether you're a fine dining establishment, a QSR, or other type. But there's no denying that customer attrition is expensive. And this screen here is a screenshot from our customer churn calculator, and you can find that on our website at the URL listed below. But using data from one of our customers and plugging it into this churn calculator to get an idea about what customer defection really costs us, one of our actual customers who has 3 locations, this is a business located in Tallahassee, Florida, receives 7,666 guests during the month of June at their 3 locations combined. That means a total of 23,000 roughly guests visited their 3 concepts. The attrition rate that we measured for their stores as a whole during the month of June was 7.73 was the actual number, but we round that to 7.5%, meaning that they lost about 1,700 guests of those 23,000 only during the month of June. If the average guest has a value of $12.50, and the average guest also visits 2.6 times in a month, then an individual guest defecting or leaving those businesses costs them $33,000 during the course of the month. When you multiply that by the 1,725 customers who defected in June alone, it doesn't take long to add up to a substantial sum that would have been retained if we were able to keep all of those guests in the fold and none of them defected and left the business. Clearly on a year, you're well in excess of $600,000 if you had 0 shrinkage or churn or defection among your customer base. Now that would be the panacea, but if you took 1/10 of that, it could still make a significant impact on your business, of course. Whatever your business is, the cost of customer attrition is something that we shouldn't take for granted. But the question is, how do you know when customers stop going to your location? You know, if you're a barber shop and you have regular customers who you see on a very regular basis and you know them all by name, especially if you're connected with them personally on Facebook or other platforms. It may be easier than in some businesses to identify when an individual guest stops patronizing you. But how do you do that in a busy restaurant? When you look out at your sea of 60 seats and you see your regulars from time to time, but you really don't know exactly when those regulars will be back, and you don't recognize, because you're busy doing other things, when they stop coming, most importantly. Well, effective customer lifecycle management means that you have a system that helps you monitor customer visit frequency, both individually and as a whole, meaning that you can identify when an individual guest is there or not, as well as get a measurement about whether your customer base as a whole is churning, meaning you have defecting customers during a period of time, or whether it's a more stable mass of customers. Customer management also allows you to predict when each customer should next return to your restaurant, which allows you to identify those who stop returning and are therefore at risk of defecting. Finally, an effective customer lifecycle management system would allow you to send automated messages to customers identified as at risk, so that you don't have to reach out on an individual basis through a manual process, which of course we just simply would not have time to do in a busy restaurant environment. But the first step is to know who your customers are. And therefore it's important to collect data and track information about your customers. Obviously, unless you're the smallest of operations, this is something that you'd like to do on an automated basis. So to the extent that we can automate the process of collecting data about our customers in the first place, and then update that data as frequently as possible, we'll be in a much better position to begin the process of identifying potentially defecting customers and intervene before we lose them altogether. What should that customer database include? Well, as much data as possible. Clearly, you'll need an email address if you intend to reach them. Email is still the preferred mode of communication for most people, despite the fact that SMS or text messaging has found a role on our devices. Email is still far more widely used and much more expected from a customer perspective as a communications mode of choice. But in addition to that, we'd also like to have information such as customers' first and last names, their gender, birthday, zip code, phone number, dates of their first and last visit, the locations they visited if we're a multi-location concept, whether or not they've received or redeemed any offers that we've sent them, and then to the point of being at risk or loyal, what is their status with our organization? Are they an active customer? Are they at risk, or might they have lapsed? First-time customers are an at-risk group that deserves special attention. We have all heard the statistics, including this one, which cite studies such as it costs 5 to 25 times more to attract a new customer than it does to retain an old one. Therefore, it makes good sense for us to put a little special effort on identifying new customers when they come to our restaurants, helping them feel welcome, and then helping them take that all-important next step, which is their second visit. When we take a look at the Bloom Intelligence dashboard a little later on, I'll show you how we can measure that. This actually is a screenshot of one of the indicators to this point, the first-time visitor return rate, and I'll show you what we can do to identify first-time visitors and put in place a mechanism to encourage them to come back for that second visit. There are many different types of loyalty programs, and I'm sure if you've been in the restaurant industry for any time at all, you've been inundated with offers to try this program or that program. These go back literally decades. The old coffee club or frozen yogurt, froyo style punch cards that need to be brought to every store in order to be validated. And the idea is if you get 10 stamps or 10 punches, you'll get a free coffee or a free frozen yogurt. As I said, they've been around for decades. Then we moved into an era of telephone numbers or some unique identifying key that you can give the cashier, which will log your purchases or at least your visit counts against your customer record. But it requires guests to provide that number every time they come to the store. More recently, some systems have allowed us to automate the loyalty tracking program by credit cards. So if you use the same credit or even debit card at the point of purchase, then those points or those purchases can be automatically logged against your customer record, which makes it very simple. You and the cashier or the server don't need to have a discussion about the loyalty program at all. It happens automatically, but it does require them that you present that same form of payment at every transaction. Credit cards, as well as Wi-Fi based systems, which we'll talk about in a moment, are one of a couple of systems which can easily track members and non-members because there's no enrollment necessary. So a credit card based or a Wi-Fi based loyalty program can work for guests who have opted into the program, as well as those who have not opted in, but just it starts tracking their loyalty and their repeat visits automatically. Wi-Fi based systems such as Bloom Intelligence only require that customers carry their phones. Like credit cards, they don't require that the phone actually be used during the transaction at all. In the case of Bloom Intelligence, we can tell when a guest returns to the location whether or not they ever connect to Wi-Fi. Now, obviously, for us to be able to contact them and deliver your message to them about the loyalty program or the rewards that they may have accrued, at some point they will have had to have given us their email so that we can send them an email-based message. But we can begin tracking their visit count from the very first moment they come into the store, again, whether or not they ever use the Wi-Fi system. What are the loyalty program attributes that are preferred by restaurant customers? Fifth on this list of top 5 is cash back on money spent at the restaurant. And that's a good thing because very few of us like to give cash back to customers, whether they're loyal or not. Fourth on the list is rewards with accumulated points, so that customers have some discretion over how they allocate those points to use them toward acquiring certain rewards. Third is really not a feature of related to points or value at all, but it's that restaurant guests would like that the program can be used across multiple restaurants of the same chain. So if I visit a store in St. Petersburg, Florida, and then I visit a store of the same chain in Washington, D.C., will those points aggregate and allow me to accumulate points that can be used elsewhere, perhaps at a third location or anywhere else in the chain? The second most important attribute preferred by restaurant customers is that they receive special offers for birthdays and other personal events. And number 1 on the list is that rewards include freebies like free appetizers, buy one, get ones, etc. And a special note about this, although we tend to think that we should give them something that we already know that they want, something that they've purchased frequently in the past, really that just leads us down the discounting path, doesn't it? We are taking something that we know that our customer was willing to spend money on, and we're now foregoing our revenues for that. And in fact, not only foregoing profit, but we're taking a loss on that item because we've expended the energy and the cost to produce that food item. And that's turning us in the wrong direction from a profitability perspective altogether. Much better is to give away something that the customer may like, but has not shown any preference for in the past, or perhaps has not tried. Because where that leads is the opportunity that customer may expand their palette of items that they choose to purchase from our restaurants. Of course, once you know a little bit about your guests, it becomes far easier to personalize the information that we send to them, which makes it much more powerful as a communication. If we can address them by name, if we can mention things that we know they've had some fondness for, or perhaps tried on one of their visits, then our loyalty program becomes exponentially more effective. Social media is also something that should play into the mix. We'll talk a little more specifically about social media and millennials just a little later on. Finally, remember that the loyalty program is not the end-all and be-all. Your restaurant and the experience that your guests have in your restaurant should be the end-all and be-all. The loyalty program, as this says, is really just a seasoning to this that creates a dynamic around that restaurant experience, which hopefully causes guests to return more often and causes them to explore choices from your menu that they may not have explored previously. But things do not always go as planned. Borrowing from a different industry, this is Jan Carlsen, who is the founder and former CEO of Scandinavian Airlines, or SAS Air Systems. And Carlsen said, "We only earn the opportunity to win a customer for life when the customer has experienced a problem and we have resolved it to their delight." This plays right into the whole idea of at-risk customers and customer defection, doesn't it? The lesson from this is, as Carlsen points out, if we can take every opportunity where a customer has experienced a misstep in our stores and turn that into an opportunity where the customer thinks more highly of us than before they experienced that misstep in the first place, then we really have had the opportunity to develop that customer for life. And if you think about your own personal experiences, both as a restaurateur as well as as a diner, in those cases where the missteps have been handled exceptionally well, either we as the diner or our guests as diners in our establishments really have had a change of demeanor, haven't we? We've reached a point where we think very differently of the location. And that, as Carlsen says, is the opportunity that we have to win a customer for life. So we'll talk a little more about how we can identify those missteps and how we can cradle those particular customers and hopefully keep them more loyal in the process. So I mentioned email being the #1 message delivery platform across all businesses, not just restaurants. But this is specifically from the restaurant industry, and it indicates the guest preference for email frequency. If you look at the light blue pie piece up in the top right, that represents daily, and then moving clockwise from there, once a week, once a month, and once every 3 months, those first 4 cells account for well over 50% of the experiences or the reported frequencies from our guests. So what this is telling us is more than 60% of restaurant patrons would be happy to hear from us at least once every 3 months. More than 50% would be happy to hear more frequently than once a month. We do have to pay attention to that gray mass on the left-hand side, which is roughly 1/3 of restaurant patrons who say they never want to hear from us. And to that end, it's important when we're communicating through email with restaurant guests that we always give them the opportunity to opt out and remove themselves from any communications. But the remaining 66% of guests who don't mind hearing from us at some point in time, whether it's once a year all the way through to daily, the question then is, what are the effective communications that we should be sending them, as well as how frequently? The same study that provided that information about email frequency indicated that these are the things that guests would like to hear from us about. Tied for most frequently cited at 40% of respondents were upcoming events and any specials or discounts. So keeping them informed about what's happening in our location and whether there's any special reason for them to attend is first and foremost on their minds. They're also very interested in understanding whether we have any new menu items. Is there some other reason that they should come in and patronize us? Has something changed that they may like to try? Birthday coupons come in 4th at 19%, blog posts 13%, staff highlights at 10%, and humor at 8%. So it's very clear to see the type of communication that our customers are telling us they wouldn't mind hearing from us. I mentioned millennials earlier, and millennials now comprise 1/3 of America's total population. I have another whole presentation for another purpose on millennials, but suffice it to say for this purpose that they want to have a relationship with us. They want to feel that they know us, and just as importantly, that we know them. Loyalty from a millennial includes an expectation that we're going to engage them on social media. And so we need to find a way to engage to include social media engagement as one of the ways that we correspond with millennials in particular. At this point, I'm going to flip over to Bloom Intelligence and show you how our platform adapts and accommodates some of the things we've already discussed through the presentation so far. So this is the Bloom Intelligence dashboard, and it's the first screen that our customers see when they log into Bloom Intelligence. And as you'll see here, it's divided into 4 main groups of metrics: footfall metrics, customer and loyalty metrics, engagement metrics, and business metrics. It's as good for single locations as it is for chains that have multiple locations, perhaps spread out all across the country, as Gator's Dockside here is spread out over a significant area. These are all live customer locations, by the way. Atlanta Bread Brick is a single location within the national chain of Atlanta Bread Company. And I'll pull this up. Let me just refresh here. Whoop. There we go. So looking at that single store, we can see the metrics that come up for that one location across their chain. Most of these metrics are data that we can provide whether or not guests ever use the Wi-Fi. So even if they never log into the Wi-Fi system, we can show you everything in the footfall group. We can show you first-time visitor return rate and average repeat rate. We cannot show you gender and age unless they actually use the system, nor can we show you anything in the engagement metrics group. But we can show you information in the business metrics group, including the percentage of your guests that used to be loyal, but who we believe may have churned or defected during a particular period of time. So in this case with Atlanta Bread Company, brick location, we can go back in time and see how the customer defection rate has changed over time. We can also see the projected customer lifetime, meaning that the average customer who attends Atlanta Bread Company at their brick location will remain loyal for almost a year and a half, and during that time can be expected to make 23 distinct visits if that customer is like other average customers at that location. We can see the per person average expenditure is $13.83 for that store, and the average lifetime value of a customer is $318. So using this information, it's easy to see if we conducted a new customer acquisition strategy which brought in 10 new guests, I would be adding over the lifetime of those guests, which is about a year and a half, an additional $3,200 in revenues. So $318 a piece times 10 guests. So these are the type of data that our customers can get from the Bloom Intelligence dashboard. Again, in most cases, whether or not their guests ever use the Wi-Fi. When we talk about a customer lifecycle management tool, we can look at, just select some of these here. We can look at things like the, excuse me, will I just remove only this one store from this example? We can look at things like the customer profiles that have been collected. This is an example of the customer profile screen showing all the guests that have logged into these stores over the period of time selected above. So 2,700 guests exactly for these 13 locations during the last 30 days. We can create filters so that we can quickly get to certain types of guests. If we wanted to only see guests with a certain visit count, or who hadn't been here in a certain period of time, or who had been at the store for less than a certain amount of time or more than a certain amount of time. We can sort them by age, by gender, or by their email address. We can also save these filters as lists that we call smart or static lists. And this is an example of a smart list, which is comprised of all of the guests who have been to these locations at least 5 times. Let's just drill into one and see the type of data that we can get. So this is an actual guest who's been at least 5 visits to the locations that she's visited. Her name's Angelina Benton. She's a female. There's her email address, her birth date, her zip code, her phone number, the date of her first and last visit, and the duration of her last visit. We can see that Angelina usually comes on Fridays, but she's been known to come on other days, and she usually arrives at 3 p.m. Angelina has not received any emails from the location she's visited, so she has had none to redeem. and her visits have been to 2 Gators Dockside locations, one in Melbourne and one in Port Canaveral, 6 times to Melbourne and once to Port Canaveral. We can see the dates and times of her first visits and her last visits. In this case, we can see that Angelina is not considered at risk of churning from the Melbourne location. In other words, given her visit frequency and the dates of her first and last visits at the Melbourne location, we still consider her an active guest. She has a low chance of churning. In contrast, she's only been to the Port Canaveral location 1 time, so our system does not have the required 3 visit minimum in order to be able to predict when her future visits will be. So we simply don't have enough information about Angelina based on her single visit to that location. Let's select someone else here. Here's Jennifer Shoemaker. Again, her name, gender, email address, birth date, zip code. We do not yet have Jennifer's phone number. We can see she's visited only the Gators Dockside Sodo location. She's been there 12 times, and based on this visit pattern, she's now at medium risk of churning. So as time goes by, if she fails to return to the location, this will change to high risk and then ultimately to churned, indicating that Jennifer is a former customer of that location. So what can we do about that once we've identified someone who may have churned from a particular location? Well, this is where the automated marketing suite comes into play. And the automated marketing suite has a couple of main components. It has a messages component and a campaigns component. I've pulled up some sample messages from some of our customers to show you the types of messages that Bloom Intelligence customers have created that effectively bring guests back to their location. This one is from Gators Dockside, and they send this simple email message with this graphic that they created and loaded into the system, and it's offering a free appetizer if they return to the location. This would explain, based on the date that the guest receives this offer, they will have 14 days starting on the date of receipt of this to come in and redeem this at the location. And it's valid only at the Melbourne, Port Canaveral, and Orlando locations. This example, which is a personal favorite of mine, is from another customer called Black Rock Bar and Grill. Black Rock actually has this series of 3 messages, which we'll toggle through. This is the one guests will receive after 30 days if they haven't returned to the location. It's a simple, we miss you, with this adorable face. They can come back and your appetizer is on us. If they still haven't returned by 60 days, they up the ante and say, we thought you were sweet on us, come back and get a free dessert. So an item of greater value. Finally, if they haven't returned by 90 days, they will up the ante one more time and say, we're filing a missing persons report. We haven't seen you in a while. Come dine with us again and receive a BOGO Signature 6 sirloin steak dinner. Clearly, this is the last effort of this chain of Black Rock Bar and Grill to regain its lost customers. If they haven't been to the location in 3 months, they're willing to go as far as this before abandoning that customer. The second component of the automated marketing system, once the messages are created, is the campaigns section. And this shows, in this particular list, there are a variety of campaigns. They're not all for at-risk customers, although some of them are. This one is for guests who have had a bad experience. I talked about Jan Carlsen at Scandinavian Air Systems, or SAS Air Systems, Scandinavian Airlines, and said that we really only have the opportunity to win a customer for life if we've successfully resolved a bad experience for them to their delight. This is where a system like Bloom Intelligence can watch for low ratings that are received as a result of a dining experience. And we have several ways to capture ratings about diners' experiences, and can automate the process of sending them an offer to bring them back to the location for a return visit. Because our system senses that they've come back to the location, whether or not they use the offer, we can then send them a follow-on message to ask them to re-rate the location and let us know if their second experience was better than the first. So we really have a way to quantify the change, or the vector in guest experience from the first visit to the second visit, and and really understand, are we successfully turning those visits around, or are we just as lousy in our guest eyes as we were the first time? Creating campaigns is a point and click process that involves just moving down this sequence of steps. We're going to go as far as here for this demonstration, because what I'd like to point out is the triggers relating to at-risk customers. And we have two. I mentioned one already, which is the number of days trigger, which is what Black Rock Bar and Grill used for its promotions for 30, 60, and 90 days. Quite simply, what they did is create a campaign that says, if we haven't seen you in 30 days, or if we haven't seen you in 60 days, or we haven't seen you in 90 days, then go ahead and send the message that I select, in this case it was this, to guests who have reached that point in time. And this is a very tried, tested, and true, but very traditional way to manage an at-risk customer program. Bloom Intelligence has a much more sophisticated tool built into our system, which rests on the back of our machine learning algorithm that calculates the churn rate and churn likelihood for individual guests. And that sophisticated trigger is the at-risk churn trigger. What this does is fires the message that you select based on the guest not returning by the date that our system has predicted they should have returned, given their past visit frequency. In other words, once a guest comes 3 times, our machine learning algorithm begins to predict when their future visits will occur. If the guest fails to return by that future visit date, then and only then do they receive the incentive to return to the store. What this means is that guests who visit your location 2 or 3 times a week are going to receive the offer to come back much more quickly than guests who visit once every couple of months. If you take those two extremes, if a guest visits your location 2 or 3 times a week and you wait 30 days to send them a message, you could have missed them a dozen times before they receive that offer to come back. So if their loyalty is about to change, there are potentially a dozen meals that they could have spent with one of your competitors before you ever sent them a message asking them to come back to the location. In contrast to that, the guest who visits once every 2 or 3 months, if your at-risk trigger is set to deliver an incentive every 30 days, then that diner will never dine at full price with you again. Every time they come to your location, they'll have a coupon waiting in their inbox, and they can receive some sort of offer or discount. And certainly that's not the way we're expecting to build our businesses. So to that end, the churn trigger is a much more effective way to deliver an incentive to bring guests back at the point that we've determined their loyalty may be waning. But related to at-risk customers, there are a couple of other triggers here which can be used to build those relationships and develop that important pattern of loyalty. One, of course, is the loyalty card trigger. And this approximates the old coffee club punch cards I mentioned earlier, where you can set a value in this cell, and guests don't need to sign up for this. It happens automatically. Once they've come into the location 10 times, they'll receive a message saying, congratulations, you've been here 10 times, here's an offer. And you can deliver that to them without anyone having to go through and review their records and take any steps at all. It's fully automated. Finally, that rating trigger I mentioned earlier, we can set this system so that when you receive a rating that's below a threshold that you determine, so for example, 1.5 out of 5 stars, then we can wait 2 hours and send them a message with an offer to say, we're sorry, our restaurant did not meet your expectations. Please come back and give us another try. As I mentioned earlier, the nice thing about this is we can set a second message that will fire to them when they come back to the location to ask them to re-rate the store so that we can have those bookend ratings and really understand the totality of their experience. Finally, we can look at individual campaigns that have been created. This is one from Gators Dockside, and we can take a look at how many people received the message, how many people came and redeemed it. We can zero into certain periods of time. If we wanted to say, let's just take a look at last month, for example. So how many people received this message just last month and redeemed it? We can see the names and email addresses of those guests. Okay. So we, on the demonstration, have covered obviously the reporting, the creation of campaigns and messages. We've looked at customer profiles and drilled into customer cards to see the detailed information about guests' expected return rates and their loyalty to locations. And we've talked about some items on the overview or dashboard screen, which include the overall restaurant churn rates, the average value of a customer, and the lifetime value of a customer. And all of those things are just a small part of the Bloom Intelligence experience. Being able to identify and handle automatically at-risk customers is certainly something we do and do well, but the entire platform is based on these two large spheres, one being the intelligence engine, which is concerned with gathering and analyzing data about our guests, and the second being the marketing hub, which makes that information actionable. It gives our system a way to automatically reach out to guests and trigger things to happen with them based on things that they do or fail to do in our restaurants. These are the ways that we create value for our customers using that system. The items in the first category can occur whether or not guests ever use Wi-Fi. So all of the information under the presence, analytics, and dashboard KPIs header are things that we can provide to our customers, even if their guests never log in, not even one time. If their guests are connecting to Wi-Fi, even just one time, then we can build customer profiles which provide the information in that second column. Finally, as those profiles develop and become more complete and we start to understand guest behavior more thoroughly within the system, the automated marketing suite can reach out automatically and engage those guests using a variety of tools to really offload the responsibility of building loyal guests and, as we've been here discussing today, saving at-risk customers to a system that does it automatically and flawlessly, allowing us to continue with doing the things that really matter to our business, which is building the business and delivering an excellent product. So I hope this brief presentation has given you a couple of insights into what you can do to address the issue of at-risk customers in your stores, and just as importantly, how the Bloom Intelligence platform may play a role in supporting that effort at your location. If you'd like to learn more about this, I'd encourage you to contact us at the email address or phone number below or through our website to sign up for a free, no obligation demonstration of the entire Bloom Intelligence platform so that you can see how we can address some of the other concerns that you may be having at your store. I thank you for your attention. Again, my name is Robin Johnston. I look forward to the opportunity of working with you, and I wish you all the best. Good afternoon.